Hey summoners, make sure you're subscribed to the Mobalytics YouTube channel and hit that bell button, that way you're always up to date and part of our notification squad. Hello summoners and welcome back to the Mobalytics patch 8.17 video tier list. There's a new champion hitting the rift this patch with the new and Willem, and turns out he is pretty darn good. However, you will not see them, Nunu and Willem, on our tier list this patch, because as always here at Mobalytics, if there's a brand new champion or a brand new rework, for the sake of being fair and allowing people to really figure out the build, itemization, everything like that, and just because the numbers are weird, whenever there's a brand new champion, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to be like a 40% win rate, so just to be fair, we do not rate them on the very first patch. However, it's likely that on the next patch you will see Nunu and Willem. So hey, guess what? Last time we made some changes, and overall we're pretty happy with it, and it seems like you guys were too, which is great to hear. Now the biggest piece of feedback, and we asked you last time, if you would be interested in having two tier lists, meaning a split one for maybe normal MMR or average MMR, and then looking towards higher MMR for another tier list. We've taken this and we've decided, yeah, we think it's a good idea. For now, in this video, we are going to be doing just the normal tier list. However, in the blog, you can get the full high elo tier list as well. But for this one, if you need that high elo tier list, make sure you check it out on the blog. Anyway, let's get started. Starting off as we always do with our friends in the top lane, we've got a couple changes and a couple new faces, most notably Sion. Wow, this champion is something else. In this clip, we're going to go over Sion and Garen because, hey, they're fighting over each other, they're duking it out a little bit, so let's just talk about them. Firstly, for Sion, he made his way into S tier. After receiving some buffs on the previous patch, turns out those buffs were pretty darn good. Also, in general, runes and damage were nerfed as well, so games are a bit longer, they're taking longer to kill you as well as Sion, and everything that was good about him before and he was already starting to creep up just exemplified that. As for Garen, yes, he did get directly nerfed on this patch, but it's not a huge nerf and he's so oppressive and so dominant in normal or lower ranks that it's not really going to dethrone him from S tier. As for the rest of the top lane tier list, currently things people like to play and are very popular are melee fighters, things like Jax, Fiora, Riven, Yasuo, even some more tanky ones but bruisers like Camille or Darius or even Nasus, who is more tanky but is still somewhat of a carry champion. And that's why you see these mage champions or range champions doing well, such as Malzahar and Karthus. So that's why we see them doing well. Things like Malzahar and Karthus are already both A tier for mid lane, and taking them top lane isn't that bad of an idea. Don't necessarily be scared of doing it. Moving on to the jungle role, we have Amumu and Rammus working their way into S tier. Again, these tanks received some buffs on the last patch and they have become pretty scary. For as long as League has existed, Amumu has been the low elo god. This guy is the best jungler in low elo and in bronze since season 1, and what makes him so good is simply he's so easy to play, he has so much CC, and his AoE ultimate that he's always been a solid stable pick in the jungle, at least for lower MMR, and now guess what, he's pretty good and you can climb with him very, very easily. Yes, he's easy to play, and so is Rammus. Both of them are very easy to play, but what makes them so good is the buffs they received, and game slowing down quite a bit. Both of the champions scale pretty well, and when it comes to things like Rammus, it's just so hard to shut down the gank. If you don't have flash, you're gonna die. Things like Talia, Kayn, and Kindred are all very good and scale really well with difficulty, meaning that if you put in the time, you're going to see a lot of success. But right now, as far as S tier, the reason why the simple things are doing so well is not only because they're simple, but they're also OP. Things like Udyr are just so easy to make work that we have to recommend it for you. On to mid lane now, where we have two of our expert picks, one in A tier and one in B tier, and you'll notice here we have adjusted some of the difficulty of the champions, and let's get into and explain why. If you guys didn't know, our difficulty is not really difficulty, it's actually just learning curve or skill floor. And what this means is that you're looking for a baseline level of effectiveness and a baseline level skill on a champion when you first pick them up. What we noticed is that we weren't necessarily being fair to a few champions, and we were overrating other champions because although they might have a very high mastery curve, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will also have a very high learning curve or a skill floor. So we have standardized control mages, and pretty much all control mages are gonna be our second tier or average tier, the blue color. And this is because more or less these champions are a bit harder to play and learn at first than other champions like Garen or Volibear. The reason why melee tankier champions are a bit easier to play, even if things like Lux aren't necessarily that difficult, is because you just can't get caught out instantly by CC and die very quickly. Our first pick of the week is coming from Adam, who has chosen Kassadin in A tier. Now Kassadin received some buffs on this patch and he seems pretty good. Kassadin received a buff to his ultimate, allowing him to have a more aggressive post 6 laning phase with the ability to all in and poke more frequently, and there's less of a window for him to die while his ult is on cooldown. Along with that, there has been a bit of build optimization, going for a more sustain heavy build with fleet footwork into the double healing runes from the Domination Tree in Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter means that Kassadin players have started to figure out, wow, starts to be a little bit oppressive and scales better in the split push. They've also shifted away from the Lucidity Boots and more towards the Sork Shoes, and then this also gives him more damage in the laning phase. While having a shift in the mid lane meta where popular picks like Ahri and other matchups where he does well into, you start to see his prevalence be better and better, and he now gets a place on our tier list. Alright, moving on to my pick of the week, which was Jace in the mid lane. Now, Jace is really good at snowballing, and he has a dominant laning phase. Since most mid laners aren't tanks, it gives you the ability to get some kills and carry the game. The problem with him is that he is required to win the game before 25-ish minutes because you definitely don't scale. But it is very possible to roam effectively, and you're still a great sieging champion. Runes are Electrocute in Sorcery or Inspiration secondary, and try to take Ignite for early pressure. Roam a lot by pushing out the wave and go for a full armor pen build with Ghostblade, Duskblade, Cleaver, Lord Dominic's Regard, and Guardian Angel, and look to run bot and snipe some kills with your QE. For bot lane this patch, we have a direct nerf to ADC itemization with the Stormrazor nerf. Now this means that a couple champions like Jhin and Draven, who were really good on their one item spike, are not exactly going to be the way that they used to be, but we have a couple new faces and we have our last pick of the week in S tier with Twitch. Twitch has been slowly creeping up every patch ever since the revert to his Contaminate damage. Since he generally builds Blade of the Ruined King, he gets relatively stronger to other ADCs who rely on the one item power spike of Stormrazor, which got nerfed as we talked about. With damage going down overall and people being more willing to play tanks in the upcoming patch, Twitch is probably going to be S tier and do really well. This shouldn't really be a surprise with how long Twitch has been a dominant ADC in the past, because he has an ideal kit for taking over solo queue. Lastly, moving on to support, where the only big change in the big faces we start to see are Taric in S tier, but the rest of it is pretty much the same way as before, except we have to mention that Thresh has finally made it into B tier after long last, after we received tens of 20 of 100 questions about Thresh. Where is Thresh? Where is Thresh? Finally, the meta feels a bit more appropriate for him. He's still very hard to play and an intense champion, but what makes him pretty good is that games are stalling out a little bit more, and he does better into some of the things that people are playing. As for Taric, although he received a buff on this patch, it's such a small little minor buff it almost could just be a bug fix category, but what makes Taric start to creep up and do really well is that not only does he thrive in the chaos of solo queue, meaning that the ulti, he can just drop it down and save his team in skirmish, but because there's a lot of skirmishes and because there's a lot of team fights, the more kills there are, the better Taric does. He's not really a champion who wants to have an extended laning phase or a super long laning phase. He wants to be proactive, and he can even be a little bit reactive with his ultimate, but more or less you want to be killing people, you want to be fighting, making good use of that ultimate, and it's just so powerful for solo queue. Taric really is the whole package when it comes to being a good support. He's tanky, he has CC, he heals you, he's got a great ultimate. Anything you need, he can take care of it. Like we said, the rest of the support position is pretty similar to last time. Things like Blitzcrank are starting to creep up, and maybe even in lower and honestly higher MMRs, Blitzcrank is starting to see a bit of play as well, so maybe look out next patch for Blitzcrank S tier. The rest of it is pretty standard of what it's been the last couple of patches, and honestly, bot lane is decently stable or slash stale, however you want to view it. Whether you're cup half full or cup half empty, bot lane is kinda stale, but also kinda stable. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the Mobalytics patch 8.17 video tier list. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials and check out the product at mobalytics.gg, and leave your questions down below on what you thought of this tier list. Anyway, thank you for watching.